Welcome back to the Think Bigger Real Estate Show. After Facebook went out today, we are back. For those of you that don't know, Facebook actually had a massive outage. It was very difficult. I actually did an interview, nobody saw it. I'm glad that's not happening today because I have with me someone who's going to help solve this problem. How do millennials really want to be treated? How is it that, what's their ideal process? I think there's some myths in the marketplace, and I have a true expert with me today, Kristen Nesterly. She founded the organization called Cultural Outreach. So first of all, let me start by saying, Kristen, thank you for being on the Think Bigger Real Estate Show.
Thank you so much for having me, Justin. Great to be here.
Yes, great to have you. So I actually met Kristen a couple weeks ago. She spoke here in Portland at the Mortgage Broker Association meeting. I was super impressed. I thought this is knowledge that more people need to know about. The room was packed, but I'm excited to get this content and her mission really out to more people. So let's talk about this a little bit, Kristen. I think you've spoken on some of the biggest stages, including Gary Vee's big event. I know you're touring around the country sharing this knowledge. Let's dig into a little bit about maybe some of the myths that are utilized to characterize how millennials want to be treated. Is it true that they actually don't want to talk to anybody? They don't want to meet with anybody. They just want to text and Facebook Messenger?
Definitely not. So I think that this is something I'm so passionate about because I think people assume that because millennials are using social media and texting and want convenient kind of access to things that we don't want the human touch. And we really want to have someone that is going to guide us through this process. I mean, buying a home for the first time, making the biggest financial decision of our lives, we want someone that is going to help guide us through that process. And I think that texting and convenient communication, Facebook Messenger, all those kinds of things are important to get the communication going and for quick communication. But you have to, technology and all of that should always be about enhancing the relationship and increasing that kind of connection with your buyer, particularly someone who's a first-time buyer. And for millennials, and we're seeing that trend even more so with Gen Z, where they want that individual relationship with a person or a brand. They want to feel like they they can trust that person. I mean, it makes sense, but I think that we miss that a lot of times when we think about our generation.
I love it. So two big potential risks here is that number one, millennials are underserved, right? Is that they aren't getting the level of service that they want because of these stereotypes. And number two, the real estate agents are missing a huge opportunity because they're assuming that they want to be treated a certain way and we're giving them something else. So I really appreciate you clarifying that there are some forms of quick and convenient communication, but it shouldn't stop with that, is what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, exactly. And I do think it is shocking how much millennials and well-off millennials, like successful millennials, don't know anything about buying a home or who to talk to about it. And I think there's just this huge gap between them feeling like they know someone who is an expert in that, who is a real estate agent, for instance, that they feel comfortable enough to reach out to and not be immediately sold to, not feel like they are stupid for not knowing these things, you know. So I think that element of underserved, it really is a big deal when we talk about our generation. But yeah, I think that being able to, it doesn't stop with a quick text or social media in any respect. It's using that as a way to build your network and provide convenient access to you, and then going from there to an in-person or video kind of communication that really improves that trust and relationship.
I love it. Let's talk about, now I know you've been a buyer. I mean, in addition to being the founder of Cultural Outreach, I know you're also the editor of Mortgage Women magazine. So again, you're involved in a lot of places, really influencing this. Let's talk about even your scenario. I know you've been a buyer and a seller before, and you described to me how some people tried to earn your business and it didn't work very well. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so it was interesting because when I bought my home, this was about 6 years ago or so, maybe 7 years now, and so I remember going through that process and how my real estate agent was, we had a sit down at the beginning, and I honestly didn't even really vibe with him that much. I thought this guy's like a typical salesman, whatever. But when we started going through the process a little bit, I realized, man, he really knows his stuff. He's educating me on all these things that I feel like I could reach out to him about anything about buying a home. I mean, anything from, if he didn't know, he was going to know someone who knew. And so that was super valuable to me. And then also when we were going through looking at homes, he would point out stuff that he'd be like, I know your goals are X and Y, so I don't know if this home is a good fit for you. So he had my goals in mind, and I felt like he had my back. So from that point on, I was just like totally sold on him. But when I was selling my home, and we can go back into that, but when I was selling my home, I posted something about it, and I had already started the business. So I wanted to know how real estate agents would reach out to me and that kind of thing. And I put my home up on Zillow, and I got a million phone calls, and I was so annoyed by all of that. But a couple people texted me and said, hey, can you jump on a call to talk about this? And then I would respond to the text messages. And one in particular stood out where she sent me a first-time homebuyer guide, or it was a seller's guide. And she texted that over and then said, hey, here's a resource for you. Let's chat when you have a second. And I thought, okay, this is the right way where it's convenient for me to schedule something. I don't drop everything to pick up a call and get sold to. And then I'm more prepared, So I think that was a good example of using technology to get to the relationship.
I'm gonna dissect this a little bit. So I think this is super fascinating, and it's a perfect case study, right? So you went to buy a home, and you found that person, like, were they referred to you? How did you find that first realtor? Who was your buyer's agent?
Yeah, so my realtor the first time was referred to me, and I think I approached that a little bit differently than most people my age or in my age range. But at the time, my dad worked for a mortgage company in the area, and so I was taking a referral based on one of his contacts. And yeah, so I mean, I do think most people get referrals from someone they know, but usually it seems like people are getting multiple referrals and then looking those people up and deciding who they want to contact. But yeah, the other one was just me posting on Zillow and seeing what happened.
So I'm curious, that first agent was not a millennial, I'm assuming?
No, he was like 40s or something, but yeah, he was very, very, I think one thing that he could have improved on was being more authentic. I mean, he had his like sales pitch ready to go and was in a suit, and that's fine. Wear a suit if you're comfortable in it, but like, it felt very like, oh, I was getting sold to. But as soon as I realized he had my back and was educating me and all of that, then I didn't care anything about that. And we're still close today. So
now let's talk about, this is a question that maybe you haven't been asked before. You went, rather than going back to that agent, you found, like, you went about finding a realtor differently the second time. Why was that?
That's because he moved out of my market. I would have absolutely sent him my business. Not even questioned it. So I sent him a lot of business after closing as well, because he stayed in touch with me. That was a really cool thing that I know a lot of people do this, but he would like, text me, call me every couple months when I first bought the home and just say, hey, just checking in, making sure everything's cool. And I'd be like, hey, I'm actually looking for an electrician. Do you know somebody? And he'd be like, yeah, let me send you my guy. And it was just so helpful. And he checked in at a year, and again, every year after, maybe even 6 months. But it was a nice check-in. And then we were also friends on Facebook after that. And so I would see his kids playing soccer on my newsfeed, and it would remind me, oh yeah, I've got someone I want to refer to him. So I ended up sending him a lot of business just because we stayed connected like that.
Very good. So it wasn't even the fact that he was always, or that you were always seeing him with his real estate hat on, just the fact that he was present on the social mediums reminded you that, oh yeah, there's that. Like, there's my realtor.
That's why I believe so strongly in staying connected and building your network as much as possible, because if people know that you are someone who's trustworthy and you've built that built that relationship in some way. Again, as soon as you can be in person, whether they end up going with you or not, if you've shown them that you have that kind of expertise and you're trustworthy, then people are going, if you stay top of mind with them, they're going to refer you a lot of business because they know that you're someone that can be trusted and that they would want others to be able to have that experience.
Well, and I think a mistake that a lot of people make is that, okay, if I'm a real estate agent, then when I'm on social media, I need to be talking about real estate. And I think that's the equivalent of like listening to the radio and thinking that you always need to be listening to commercials. Like people actually don't want to always hear about what you do for a living. Sometimes they just want to hear about you playing soccer, right? Or being a parent, or being like that you ride horses, or whatever it is, right? Like they want to be a human being. True.
So that's actually a big thing with anyone building a personal brand. You want to have an element of your expertise in there. That is part of who you are. You are someone who is all about, buying and selling homes and building wealth through real estate, whatever. So that's part of what you're providing. But people also want to connect with you on a human level. And I think with social media and all of these things, we have blurred the line between professional and personal, but it's in a cool way. Like we're getting to know you. So if you're way into Portland coffee shops or whatever, then which every time I'm in Portland, I'm like, how many coffee shops can I hit? But if you want to show that to the audience so that they have something to connect with. So I would encourage everyone to really think about what are some of the personal, or what are the things that describe me, and how can I communicate that to my audience through these social channels? And it's just about you being in touch with your authentic self in a lot of ways.
I love it. That's what branding's all about, right? Is talking about who you are and and how, what your value is in helping other people.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I love about today's marketing, really, is it's not about having the right, sales tactic in a way. It's about you being yourself and just making sure that you're communicating your value and who you are as a person in a way that builds meaningful relationships. So with social media, people feel like we've lost so much touch with humanity in that way. And that's absolutely true. There's so many issues around this, but if you do it right, you can build a meaningful network and a message that has huge impact in a way that connects in an authentic way. But you have to be intentional about that.
Well, again, going back to your home buying process, right? You got referred, he provided excellent service, and then you stayed in contact using digital methods. But you met with him in person, which I think, again, is a bit of a myth a lot of people have, that they actually don't want to meet with you in person. Now, your second real estate agent was interesting because they came at you with value, right? They didn't come at you selling, because you said that you got all kinds of phone calls, right? Tons of people trying to get your listing, and you didn't go for that. You went for the one person that communicated with you in a way that was them giving value and letting you communicate with them on your terms, not their terms. Right?
Yeah. And I think that, I don't know, I can't tell you how many people I met with that, because I was seeing what this was going to be like and kind of testing the waters a little bit. And I felt like so many people were trying to work one over on me. And I'm like, you don't have to do that. Like, why are you trying to get to the quick, like, we gotta, this is what I have. And a lot of people were sharing how they could sell my home or market my home. And I'm like, I can do that myself. That was, I think that was a big eye opener too, is that you're no longer the holder of the listing completely. You're no longer the only marketer. Everyone's a marketer in a way. But what I ultimately realized was that going through the transaction is extremely complicated, and I needed a guide through that. So what's kind of bad is I ended up not having a real estate agent to go through the selling process, because I did feel like everyone was just trying to sell me so hard, and I didn't like any of those experiences. And I had a buyer contact me who also didn't have a real estate agent. So we went through that process without one, and I regretted it so bad. I was such a mess, and it was so complicated. I didn't know what was going on. I was like trying to do all this research about the contract, and I don't know, I just felt so lost. And but we ultimately got through it. I got through it, but I was I look back and think, man, that was not smart. But if someone had communicated to me, hey, this is what's going to be going on, and it's not just about taking the right photo of your house, because I can do that. It's about knowing that you're getting the right deal in place, and that you know how to manage these types of things. So
people don't want to be sold to. People want to be guided, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think being known as the go-to resource in your community around everything around home. And maybe for you're way about home design, or you're all about the, I don't know, whatever thing that makes you unique. Definitely emphasize that. But I think you also want to have the resources in your network to refer people for anything around home. And that puts you at the center of your community.
That's awesome. Great stuff. Just in closing, Kristen, if people are thinking, okay, I get the fact that I need to be more present on these social mediums. I know there's a lot of reluctance for people doing video. I see more and more people being engaged with social media. What platforms would you say people need to pay special attention to? Maybe top 3 in your order. Like number 1 would be what?
In terms of social media, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I think that I always say number 1 is Facebook. I mean, it is where everyone is of all ages, and even millennials and Gen Z are still using Facebook. They're not using it the same way, but they're not going through their news feed like older generations are. But they'll use it to look you up. They'll use Facebook Messenger to hit you up, and they're using events and things like that in Facebook. So that's still number 1. It's also very intuitive and easy to get going on. I personally have had, I don't know, I like Instagram for its usability, and I think millennials and Gen Z, the trends show that is where everyone is spending most of their time, and particularly with Instagram stories, which also can be on Facebook stories and all of that. But that's where you get that day-to-day authentic self, taking photos at your Portland coffee shop or whatever. And that's where people get to know you really well. So I think those are the top 2. And then outside of that, kind of depends on where your audience is or where you feel most comfortable. For some people, that is Twitter, but Twitter is very conversational and very discussion oriented, and it kind of depends on how comfortable you feel. Like every platform is kind of like its own universe, or own country at least. And you need to feel comfortable in those norms. But a lot of people are doing really well with Pinterest, and but Facebook and Instagram are still number 1 and 2 in my opinion. What are your thoughts on that, Justin?
I would say probably number 3 is becoming. It didn't used to be this way, but I'm giving more special attention to LinkedIn. I think real estate events, and I totally agree with you. Facebook 1, Instagram 2, and I would put LinkedIn is number 3. And I know you have a strong presence there. I think because real estate agents, in order for them to not be entirely disrupted, like the industry's being disrupted, but their individual business doesn't have to be disrupted. And I think the way out for them, the way forward, is to be more of a professional than less of a professional. And I think part of that is starting to act like a professional and showing up as a guide, as a professional within LinkedIn. I think is part of that. That's why I say that one.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I always advocate for LinkedIn with loan officers and things like that, but with working with directly consumers, I hadn't thought about that as much. But I think that as a community, someone that is an advocate in your community and someone who's building those kinds of community resources too, that becomes so important. So at least at a minimum, having a profile shows that you're just a professional and that you are who you are, because people will look you up there. But also it allows you to build relationships with other professionals in your community that would be really important too. So.
I typically don't go this long, but I love the conversation. So if you've got 2 more minutes to talk about one more topic, I want to hit it. You okay?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So you and I had this conversation after you spoke in Portland about a pretty controversial statement that Gary Vaynerchuk had said, that he didn't know if it made sense for people to buy a home. I know Grant Cardone, who's another big mentor of mine, had said something similarly as well. What's your take on that? Good advice, bad advice?
I think that, I think it reflects a couple of things. One, that he had mentioned something about not putting or not wanting to invest 20% down on a home, that you need to, diversify and all that kind of stuff, and or not be tying up your cash like that. And I think that reflects the fact that he didn't understand or didn't think of that you could put way less than that down on a home, and shows the need for education and promoting that. But also I think it does show a shift in expectations and how millennials are thinking too. I mean, he leads a lot of the trends in terms of, customer expectations and talking about that. And I think it shows that reflection that we are not just thinking about homeownership as the American dream or as a piece of, the next stage in our life. We're thinking we need to think about or talk about homeownership as a good investment, and why that would be a good investment and when. And so thinking outside the box in terms of how we communicate homeownership and the value of homeownership, I think is really important for millennials who are always on the go, who can move easily and don't want to feel tied down. We need to talk about the fact that you can buy a home and you can Airbnb it out if you want to. And I apologize, I'm in downtown Los Angeles and there's just always sirens coming through. But anyway, those are my thoughts on that.
I love it. I appreciate you asking. I think if one is looking at some of the things that you mentioned, simply to be free and not tied down, that may make sense. From a wealth building standpoint, the statistics are irrefutable that those that own real estate end up with far superior wealth than those that don't. And I think part of that, what at least Grant Cardone is talking about is that, like, rent for less and then invest the money. The problem is society has proven that it's not good at saving without it being a forced savings plan. That if you were to rent for less, which I don't know, it depends on what market you're in, if that's actually reality, and actually invest the rest, then that would work. However, with a mortgage, you're forced to save money, or you get or you lose your house. And so I think if people were awesome savers in general and really good at reinvesting the money in higher return assets, then that might be good advice. But I think it's really bad advice because most people, rather than putting that money in some long-term savings vehicle, they'll put it into some shiny new gadget. So
definitely. And I think that's a good perspective on that macro level. But I think even on communicating this individually with people or in your networks, it really is a good way to build wealth. But we need to communicate that and show, for you individually, this is what it would look like over the next 5 years for you to own a home. And for someone to tangibly see that makes a huge difference too.
Well, and that goes back to exactly what you think millennials want, right? Or what they're saying they want is that they want to be led with true knowledge and data. And what a great opportunity for real estate agents, not even just on a one-on-one, but start doing videos about the value of wealth, comparing, taking the statistics of people that don't own real estate versus those that do. Like, it's dramatic. I think there's a great opportunity to really be a leader when it comes to that kind of content, to be sharing with people, like, despite what maybe these digital media figureheads are saying, here's the reality of those that do and those that don't. Which camp you want to be in.
Exactly. And I mean, you think about today's market where we have an app for everything. We have so much noise on social media. We can Google search any question we have, but we are in total chaos. I mean, you do that and we still don't know the first thing. We are looking for someone who's going to come along and say, hey, let me simplify this for you. Let's talk through this together. Let me empower you as the consumer to have the best knowledge and advice that is best for you. So it's not about this is what's best for everyone. This is about me helping to empower you as a consumer. So.
You're right. There may be some people out there who it really does make sense to not own, right?
Yeah.
And I think you're right. That's where it goes from being able to Google something to be able to sit down with a professional guide that can say, tell me your situation, very similar to what your real estate agent did, is what do you actually want to achieve? Then they can give customized advice that's actually good for you, not just good for the macro, but good for your specific life.
Yeah, exactly. That's so important.
I love it. I've absolutely loved this conversation, Kristen. You're super bright, doing some great things. And I look forward to our next conversation. But I want to thank you again for all that you've contributed to this audience, the Think Bigger real estate audience. And I look forward to our next conversation. Oh, one more thing. Let me put up here, if some of the audience here are wondering how they get in contact with Kristen, her name's been up on the screen the entire show, so go look at that. Find her on LinkedIn. And then here's her website, culturaloutreach.com. She helps kind of bridge the generational gap, as well as helps underserved communities when it comes to the whole real estate process. And just tons of value. She's a fantastic public speaker. I firsthand can say that. And I'm excited for the difference and impact she's going to continue to make in the lives of a lot of people. So thank you
so much.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. All right, we will catch you on the next one, everybody. Thanks again for tuning in.